So I want to welcome everybody to our second meeting, and I want to make sure that everybody received the agenda for the meeting. Great. And also just to hopefully you all have had an opportunity to see the web page that we have dedicated to this task force on the OASAS website. We definitely want to make sure that people are aware of this task force and the meetings, and that there are recordings of all of the meetings, and so that people can take a look at what's been going on, and that they can also submit public comments through the email address, and they can come in person to the meeting that is scheduled for Staten Island. So I just want to make sure that you're letting your stakeholders know about this opportunity to have their voices heard. And just as a reminder, the email address is overdosetaskforce@oasas.ny.gov. So again, any public comment can be submitted through email or in person at the meeting that's going to be on September 27th in Staten Island. And all of that information is on the webpage.
Can I just add to that we are actively monitoring the mailbox. So any questions that we receive or comments, we will make sure that we share with all the board members. To date, the questions have mainly just been about asking when future board meetings are and about scheduling, but certainly any substantive comments, questions that come in, we will make sure that the whole board sees those questions and comments.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. And I just want to say also that in the past few weeks, I've been doing some listening sessions across the state, and I've heard a lot of counties really talking about how we all can work together better, sort of both at the local level and at the state level. So I really do think there's a lot of interest in people really recognizing the need to really come together, because people with addiction obviously touch so many different systems, and that working together, we're just so much more effective in really addressing the overdose epidemic. And so I think, hearing comments from a lot of people across the state has reinforced to me the importance of this task force, and really just, the need for all of us to work together, because we know that, one agency or one person, one program is really not going to be able to really address this, but it's through working together that we're really going to be able to bend the curve for the overdose epidemic. Dr. McDonald, I don't know if you want to make any comments before we jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Cunningham. Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, it's thrilling to see everybody again today, and I really thought last meeting was great. I enjoyed Commissioner Cunningham's overview of what the Office of Addiction Services and Supports was doing. I really thought that was very helpful, and I think it was great to hear Moira talk about the Office of Mental Health is doing as well. And I think it's just interesting to see how we're all going to work together with all this. And one of the themes I picked out of the meeting last that I thought was really helpful was how often just as state agencies, we really do interact with the lives of so many people across the state. And it just, one of the things I brought back internally to the Department of Health was just looking at all the programming we do and seeing how we can just connect all of that. And even just looking at the programming that isn't related to overdose work, because so much of what the Department of Health does is we touch people's lives every day. So trying to think about how we can think about how to tactfully do that. And it's just interesting. And I was thinking about, how to get more, one of the themes I took out of the meeting last time too, was just hearing about, I thought there's some really good recommendations. Some were, a little bit stretch goals, which I love stretch goals, by the way. I thought that was great. There's others that were just really, I thought, common sense. One of the themes I picked up was about integrating, when people go see healthcare, what does it look like if there's integrated care? And it was interesting. I was thinking about this yesterday. I was actually up at the St. Regis Mohawk tribal lands yesterday for just doing a visit of their tribal lands and getting to know them. And it was interesting. I looked at their Indian Health Service clinic, how they had, mental health and addiction treatment and physical health all in the same space and really working together in that. And it just, reminded me of what it was like when I worked in the federal government, how you can do some of these things. So it's just interesting how that model exists. And I think there's other ideas though that I'm looking forward to hearing about. And I love the agenda today. I like the themes that are coming out of today. So I'm really interested in hearing what the presentations are going to be today and see if some other themes are emerging. So I'm looking forward to a great meeting today. So thank you so much, Commissioner Cunningham.
Great. So, so we have agency presentations, first from docs, then from SCOC, and then from state police. And so I think maybe we'll have the three, agencies present, and then we certainly have time for question and answer and discussions afterwards. So let me turn it over to docs.
Hi, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Hi, I'm Megan Yiser. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Health Services here in DOCS. I don't have a formal PowerPoint presentation, but just some talking points to go over today as far as what we're doing for opioid prevention, overdose prevention in our agency. The first piece is kind of the smaller scale, which we've done for several years. When we have incarcerated that are preparing to be released into the community, they go through a series of educational sessions to prepare them for release. We've embedded both overdose awareness and Narcan training into what we call phase 3 of our transitional services program. So all of the incarcerated that are preparing to release receive this education. They get information about how to prevent opioid overdoses, how to utilize Narcan, and then upon their release, they are offered 2 Narcan kits to take with them. Sometimes we have them take them, other times they're not all that interested. It kind of depends on the makeup of that particular facility or the makeup of that particular classroom. But it is, something that we do offer. Excuse me. We're also, we do provide them with phone contacts to replace the Narcan kits after they release, if that's something that they're interested in doing. So that's kind of the small scale piece that we use to touch on those that are preparing to release. More system-wide, obviously, would be medication-assisted treatment. DOCS has, for a very long time, provided methadone to pregnant females at Bedford. That was sort of our introduction into that on a smaller scale. But starting in September of 2018, we began to slowly expand our footprint as to what we're doing related to MAT. The first project that we worked on in 2018 was at Queensboro, where anybody that was returning to state custody with a sentence of less than 120 days that was on methadone was continued on methadone. And that sort of got our feet wet as far as a little bit of a larger scale. Starting in 2019, we began to expand that, offering methadone to all of our reception center incarcerated. So again, that sort of helped us ramp up a little bit. We created contacts with some local OTPs. We got contracted with them to provide the methadone services, the methadone medication, and then slowly started to expand that throughout our facilities. So by the end of 2021, we were offering methadone in 16 facilities. Then along came the legislation that I'm sure obviously everyone is very familiar with, that changed our scope a little bit, or a lot, so we really started to look at what we were doing, what we needed to do to be in compliance with the legislation, and made sure that we had contracts in place for methadone for all 44 of our correctional facilities. And then slowly, before the start of the legislation taking effect in October of last year, we did begin to do some buprenorphine inductions on a smaller scale at some of our facilities. So once the legislation did take effect, we had developed a program, an assessment program to kind of help us navigate through the process, because we fully anticipated that there were going to be a lot of takers, so to speak. So we did formalize an assessment program. We had what we called our MAP 2000, which was basically a list of 2,000 incarcerated that had been interviewed and indicated that in the year prior to their arrest that they were utilizing some sort of substance. So that group of 2,000 was prioritized in our assessment process. However, any incarcerated individual could request to be assessed for MAT through the sick call process. And then we also had the ability for our facility executive teams to refer people that they felt were a priority case, i.e. somebody that maybe had overdosed recently and been Narcaned in our facility. So, you know, we have a formalized assessment that our providers use to determine whether or not MAT is indicated. If there is an OUD diagnosis, then the provider has that conversation with the incarcerated, and if it's agreed that MAT is the preferred, you know, treatment course, then the individual is started on one of the MAT medications. So at the onset of the legislation last October, we had about 580 incarcerated that were in the MAT program. As of this morning, our numbers are 3,428. So we have clearly grown exponentially over the past almost year now. We have about 365 on methadone, 2,505 on daily dose buprenorphine, approximately 523 on Sublocade, and then 35 on naltrexone. So we offer all forms of medication. We're finding Sublocade to be really beneficial in our setting, just because it does decrease the chance of diversion, which obviously is going to happen in a correctional setting. So overall, you know, it's been a really positive experience for us to roll out this program, and it's been really exciting for me to be on the forefront of what we're doing here in Docs, and I would just appreciate the opportunity to share it with everybody this morning. So that's kind of it in a nutshell as to what we're doing here in Docs, and yeah, that's what I got.
Great. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Let me turn it over to SCOC. Is it Ellen? I know it's okay. You're on mute.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen here, guys. I'm a nurse. I'm not a techie person, so bear with me. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. I got all kinds of little pop-ups on my screen because I just got a new computer. So I'm Ellen Tryon. I am a registered nurse and forensic supervisor here at the Commission of Correction. And I do have a PowerPoint because I would have a tendency to just ramble on. So this will keep me focused. So I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about who we are and how we are working with county jails. And I can't get my screen to go. Here we go. Okay, so Commission of Correction, we are a very tiny agency. We are about 55 people right now. We are different from Docs. So the mission of the State Commission of Correction is to provide a safe and stable and humane correctional system in New York State. We basically have some oversight over the juvenile SSDs, OCFS juvenile secure facilities, state correction facilities, county jails, as well as police lockups. So for those agencies, our function, obviously, we have some minimum standards that we have, that we have that they follow. We evaluate, investigate, and oversee local and state correctional facilities, police lockups, and juvenile facilities. We assist them in developing new correctional facilities, and we also do a lot of technical assistance. So that's who the commission is. And now let's talk a little bit about what we are doing as far as substance use disorder treatment and overdose prevention. As Megan mentioned, October 7th in 2021, Governor Hochul signed into law the legislation that allows incarcerated individuals with substance use disorder the opportunity to participate in a MAT program. On August 8th, the Office of Addiction Services issued correspondence to all the county jails indicating that that they had to come up with a plan for how they were going to do this. Now, keep in mind that county jails are much different than the state dock system because each county runs their own county jail. So there's no central office for county jails. Each one kind of does its own thing within our standards. So the next thing that happened was October 4th, OASAS issued letters to the counties approving the plans that they submitted. Waivers for methadone were granted to 8 counties due to the inability to obtain OTP services within a reasonable distance. And they were granted these waivers for up to 1 year. In October 6th, we here at the Commission adopted on an emergency basis amendments in additions to our minimum standards. The regulations became effective October 7th, 2022, which coincided with the legislation date. So a little history here, I gave that to you because this is very new for county jails as a mandate. Prior to this, we had a handful of jails that were offering MAT services and at different levels. So that's why I gave you that little history. So during this period of program development, what the commission did was we engaged with several facilities for on-site technical assistance, telephone conferencing. We reviewed some policies, made recommendations, and helped people out in trying to obtain services. And again, the county jail system is very unique. We have everything from Hamilton County that has a capacity of 6 incarcerated individuals and a daily population average of about 3 to New York City with Rikers Island with thousands of people. So please keep that in mind as we go through this. So the county jail program requirements, each one had to have a program that included initial screening, a medical screen, assessment and diagnosis, treatment planning, medication therapy, counseling, SERPA services, and transition and discharge planning. So this was a big pill to swallow for these little county jails. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about our functions and then within those functions, what we found since this all started. So the commission does program monitoring. We also do compliance assessments in the county jails, and we offer technical assistance. So the first one, program monitoring. The local facilities, per the legislation, were required to submit an annual report to us, and it's due the first day of February each year. The report details the operation and the function and the effectiveness of the facilities program and their transitional services for the preceding year. The information I'm about to share with you reflects only what happened between October 7th and December 31st. So it might be a little, it might not look as juicy as it should. So in 2022, a report the reports were evaluated, and I was happy to say that every local correctional facility, including New York City, participated in the treatment of substance use disorder and transitional services, although the degrees were varied greatly, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. The variety of programming offered is definitely related to the ability for the facility to obtain resources from the community, or the ability to manage the program with their own staff. The three areas that we found that the facilities most struggled with were the development of treatment plans, obtaining services of a SERPA, and the ability to provide one form of each one form of each treatment for SUD approved by the FDA, and this was methadone. Some of our facilities are very remote and are hours away from the nearest OTP, so this was one of the biggest problems we had. And we're working on it with OASAS. So as far as program operation, 6,452 individuals were screened by a healthcare provider or substance abuse professional to see if they had a diagnosis of SUD. And of the 6,452, 1,543 were determined to suffer from SUD and were admitted to the program. So that was approximately 76% of the people. And there is a little asterisk next to the 6,452 because right now we do not have the technology to know how many actual admissions came into county jails during that time period. We are working with IT and DCJS to be able to keep better track of that, so we know that one number equals the other and everybody's getting screened. One of the other things that we looked at was the discontinuation of MAT, and of the 1,543 individuals who were enrolled in the program, 115 were discontinued from the program prior to their release or their transfer to another facility. And of that 115, 98 opted out of the program. 5 individuals were removed from the program due to medical reasons, and 12 individuals were removed from the program for other reasons. And this is something that we have to, at the commission here, keep our eye on, because diversion is out there, and many times people just want to discontinue the medication because somebody is diverting. So we are working with the facilities on that, and we're keeping our eye on that. And the other thing that we noted was transition services. 669 MAT program participants were released from incarceration during that time period. And of those who were released, 548 were provided with transitional services. And this is, again, it varies from facility to facility. Some places have a lot of resources. Pretty much everybody is giving out Narcan to their released individuals. Some places are offering test strips for xylazine and fentanyl as well. So there were 98 participants who were released without transitional services due to them being transferred unexpectedly or released from court. And I'm losing my screen here again. Okay, here we go. So 85% of the people that were in the program were released with transition services, education, and Narcan into the community. So the other thing that we are doing are compliance assessments. The commission is required to assess these programs for compliance, and we also actively monitor reported events, sentinel events, incarcerated grievance appeals, and written complaints. We are learning a lot about MAT programs from these sources, but additionally, we do routine evaluations of the facility's MAT programs in relation to our minimum standards. And we are well into our first year of doing that. I have a team of myself and 3 others, and we are out there looking at facilities. We are rotating them on a 3-year basis. And we also are looking at facilities who OASAS wants us to look at, or the facilities are requesting themselves. And lastly, technical assistance. In addition to monitoring and assessing for compliance, we are continuously engaging in technical assistance for these facilities. This is something huge for these facilities. They've worked very, very hard to keep Suboxone out of their facilities for so long, and now so it's a big culture shock for the staff in the jails. So we are constantly trying to work with them to find ways for education and getting this practice moving in the facilities to prevent overdoses. So one of the things that we do, we have here at the commission is a dedicated mailbox just for the facilities to email my team for MAT, overdose questions. So somebody looks at that every day of the week and answers questions in real time, and that's empire@scoc.ny.gov. But we do a lot of technical assistance with these individuals or these facilities because substance abuse is not something that was with the new legislation. It's just a whole lot of new information for these folks. And any questions? But I guess we're waiting till the end for questions.
Great, thanks so much, Ellen. Yeah, we definitely we'll have a lot of time for discussion and question and answer. So next up is State Police.
Good morning, it's James Brown, State Police. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yep, as mentioned in our first meeting, I'm captain with the State Police, just about 25 years, and assigned here currently at the division headquarters. I'm the rep here for our task force. So unfortunately, State Police, law enforcement has a front row seat in this opioid crisis, this opioid overdose epidemic that we're all in the middle of right now. Every single day, State Police, law enforcement is involved in opioid-related incidents, as well as opioid-related interactions with the public. Now, this could vary in many different ways. I'll give you a couple examples. One example: trooper conducts a routine traffic stop. Keen troopers looking into the car, talking to the operator, and ultimately discovers illegal opioids inside the vehicle. Ultimately, that results in arrest. That happens every single day. Troopers driving down the road and observes a vehicle operating erratically. Trooper will then conduct a traffic stop, interview the operator, and eventually determine that the operator is impaired on some sort of opioid. Very dangerous. We get these accidents every single day. Unfortunately, some are fatal because people are driving impaired. That ultimately will lead to an arrest. Troopers are dealing with that every single day. We're seeing examples of burglaries, uptick in burglaries. During this crisis, people who are dependent and can no longer get their hands on prescribed medication are going at it the wrong way, and they're getting desperate. They break into houses, and they're not stealing jewelry and electronics anymore. They're stealing medication. And obviously that's not a good thing, and the State Police are being called to those types of incidents, and we're investigating those, and we are seeing that people are committing these crimes for the sole purpose of to feed their dependency, and obviously that's been an uptick for us recently. But lastly, and the most common opioid-related incident that we, State Police, law enforcement, are dealing with is the overdoses, and that's why we're here. We are seeing tremendous amount of fatal and non-fatal overdoses. I pulled up some stats, at least just on the State Police end. These are just State Police stats. This does not include local town, village, NYPD. This is just State Police stats that the state police investigated. 2023 year to date, this is from January through the end of August, end of the summer, we responded to 775 overdoses. Of those overdoses, 128 of those were fatal, and 541 of those we used naloxone. In reference and comparison, 2022, for the 12 months, we handled 1,229 overdoses, and of those overdoses, 217 were fatal, and we used naloxone in 819 of them. And lastly, in 2021, we handled 1,110 suspected overdoses. Of that number, 213 were fatal, and we used naloxone in 751 of them. Three of the counties for us, for at least from our perspective, Oneida County, Clinton County, and St. Lawrence County were three of our counties where we saw the most action, unfortunately, in with respect to fatal and non-fatal overdoses. So obviously, it's very clear that every single day, every shift, in every county, all 62 counties, state police, law enforcement, we're responding to and handling these overdoses. Usually we are responding to these overdoses as a result of a 911 call or somebody just calling the police directly. Most of the time, we are either the very first responder. We're the first one on the scene or first or second. It's either usually us or EMS. Trooper arrives on the scene. First thing he does, obviously, he or she is checking the vitals. At the same time, he or she is communicating with other responding units, other responding law enforcement, other responding EMS. And then obviously we're making a quick decision. Usually it's within seconds to administer Narcan. So these are all quick decisions that our members are doing every single day. Now, it's not over at that point. The case continues. So best case scenario, after they administer Narcan, the subject regains consciousness, their vitals come back, and Trooper just doesn't walk away. Trooper's now picking up the phone, depending on the situation, oftentimes calling that person's mother, father, relative, friend, and reaching out to them, communicating with them what had happened, asking them to come to the scene. Worst case scenario is a fatal overdose, obviously, and we're still involved there. The trooper or the investigator would then be making a phone call, or it's usually a knock on the door, notifying the victim's relative, parents, friends that their loved one has died. So that's a very difficult task to perform, but that's a reality that's happening every single day, and we're, like I said, we're involved in that. So long and short, yes, state police, law enforcement, we're involved every day with this opioid epidemic. Obviously, it's not good. It's only getting worse, and that obviously leads us to the question: what are we doing about it? What is the state police? What is law enforcement doing in general to address this crisis, this epidemic? So real quick, this won't be too long. I just have 5 quick bullet points as to what the state police is doing to address this situation. First one would be training, preparedness, equipment, and I'll go into each one individually. Second one would be proactive enforcement. Third one would be proactive approach to overdoses. Fourth one is intelligence gathering and sharing. And the fifth and last one would be education. So when I say training, preparedness, and equipment, it goes back to our training in the academy. Every trooper that graduates the academy is trained in drug awareness. We're trained to identify certain drugs, opioids. We're trained to identify signs and symptoms, the different effects, the trends, old trends, new trends, upcoming trends. And this goes for ongoing training as well. We have in-service training throughout the year within the state police. Summer training, summer in service, winter in service. So our members in the field who have time on can also get trained with the most updated intelligence and data regarding opioids and overdoses. And then this is more of an FYI. Every trooper, every uniformed trooper has Narcan on them at all times. They have a nasal Narcan. That's what we use in the state police. Nasal Narcan is inside every marked troop car. So that's important. So, there's 5,000 state police members, 3,000 are uniform members. So there's a lot of nasal Narcans out there. And when we're the first on the scene, that's good because we have the equipment, we have the medicine available to administer to administer to the victims of these overdoses to try to get them obviously the medicine that they need. So that's important that our members have that equipment and medicine. And in addition, additional equipment, a lot of our specialty units, our narcotics units, have an instrument, about a $25,000 piece of equipment called a TrueNarc. Basically, it tests drugs. It tests drugs and it tells us what they are. So a lot of times we'll show up on a scene, whether it's fatal, non-fatal, and there'll be opioids present. We don't know what it is, and they could be dangerous to the people that are there, first responders, family members inside their residence. We have that TrueNarc a lot of times on hand, or we could bring it in and we could test the opioids on hand, tell us what exactly it is. So we're not guessing, and so nobody else gets injured or sick. So that's an important thing. Second bullet point was proactive enforcement, and really this comes down to one goal. The one goal is to remove illegal drugs, illegal opioids from our communities and get them off the streets. Very simple. The goal is to identify the source of the supply, identify the drug dealer, identify the person that's pushing these illegal opioids into our community. We want to cut it off at the source, and ultimately, if we can, apprehend the drug dealer. Get the bad guy, put him in jail, hold him accountable for pushing these illegal drugs into our communities and into our streets. So we are proactive in many different ways. So we have uniformed troopers every single day conducting highway interdiction. They are taking these illegal opioids off the street. We have specialized units that conduct more long-term investigations. We have a community stabilization unit, which is a combination of uniformed troopers and investigators that we strategically dispatch to address certain issues. So if there's a particular issue in the city of Albany or in the village of Ellenville, we could strategically dispatch them to those areas just as extra bodies, extra manpower to help with this epidemic. Our narco unit, we call it VGNet. And they focus mainly on medium to long-term drug investigations, and as of late, a lot of it's fentanyl. And again, the goal is to cut off the source and take these illegal opioids off the street. So we don't want them to get in the hands of anybody else. And then we have our SIU is a special investigations unit. Again, they focus on long-term investigations, and obviously they do drug investigations, narcotic opioid investigations, and they're involved as well. And in addition, state police also partners with federal task forces. We have state police investigators with the DEA, with the FBI, with HSI. Now these guys are doing incredible cases. A lot of it's down in New York City. We travel out of state, and that's the focus again. Cut off the source. Now, in that case, we're looking to cut off the source into New York State. So a lot of these drugs are coming into New York City. These guys are focusing on trying to cut the source off there. And obviously we don't want these illegal opioids coming into the state, into the city, and then they're eventually going to move upstate or out western part of the state or into Long Island. So that's what these guys are focusing on. Third bullet point would be proactive approach to overdoses. So when there's a fatal overdose, obviously we have a uniformed trooper on the scene. State police investigator, the BCI, the investigators handle every death investigation. So an investigator will respond to the scene. He will treat it as a crime scene. He does his normal things, take photos, document the scene, interviewing people, take depositions, but it doesn't end there. We just don't, after that's done, we just don't leave. So if we believe it's involving fentanyl or it's related to an overdose, we're being proactive. We're not walking away. We are now talking to people. We are talking to the victim's friends. We are talking to the victim's parents. We are talking to everybody he or she hung out with the question, hey, where did they get the drug from? Where did they get the opioids from? And we're trying to trace that back to the source, and that's what we want to do. We want to cut off that source. We want to make sure that source isn't supplying anybody else. We want to make sure that that there's no further incidents, no further overdoses, no further deaths. So we are being very proactive when it comes to these overdoses. We're talking to a lot of people. We are initiating investigations. Some of them turn out to be long-term, and we're trying to obviously prevent any future overdoses with that particular batch. So we're definitely taking a more proactive approach when it comes to investigating fatal overdoses. My fourth bullet point was intelligence gathering and sharing. We have a unit called NISIC. State Police runs the New York Statewide Intelligence Center. It's an intelligence center over in East Greenbush. It's composed of investigators, troopers, analysts, as well as reps from many other many other numerous local, state, federal agencies. And it is what the name is. It's an intelligence center. That unit collects intelligence, it collects data, interprets it, and then pushes it back out to the law enforcement community. It pushes it out to the troopers, to our investigators, to other local law enforcement. That unit also monitors overdose spikes, overdose clusters. So when they see that City of Kingston has had 5 overdoses in the last 24 hours, that's a problem. You know, any overdose is a problem, but when there's 5 in a 24-hour span, that raises red flags. That's indicative of a bad batch of fentanyl, and if there's 5, there's probably 5 more coming. So they are pushing that information out to the local authorities down in Kingston, whether it's State Police, City of Kingston PD, the Sheriff's Department. They're letting them know about these clusters, about these spikes, offering assistance, and it comes down to intelligence sharing. So if they're not aware of it, then that it's going to continue to happen. But if they are aware of this information, then the law enforcement agencies in that area can be proactive and, like I said previously mentioned, try to cut off the source of this of these opioids into the community. And my fifth and last bullet point would be education, which state police and law enforcement are involved in. State police used to have SROs in many of the schools throughout the state. We no longer do. That role has been taken up by a lot of the local law enforcement agencies in the state, as well as the sheriff's departments. But that doesn't mean we're not involved in schools anymore. We still have great relationships with schools at all levels, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges within the state. And because of those great relationships, we are frequently tapped with with them asking us, hey, come to our schools. Talk to our kids, talk to the faculty about drug awareness, about opioid awareness, about opioid overdoses. Teach us something, and we will. Upon request, we will send whether it's a trooper who's familiar with the area, it's an investigator, it could be a narcotics investigator, it could be a supervisor. We will send people into the schools and talk to the students and faculty about all of this, and it's a good thing. It's good for the community, it's good for the school, it's good for our own members. We'll put on a presentation. We will answer questions, obviously at the end, and obviously we're always looking to educate everybody, especially our youth, about this opioid epidemic. And that's it. That's all I have on the state police end.
Great, thanks so much, Captain Brown. Thank you, everybody, for your presentations. I think they're really enlightening to hear about the work that you're doing. And I think we should open it up for discussion, question and answers. And maybe I think the best way to do this would be to raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. Of course. Dr. McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ham, and thank you, everybody. Really nice presentations. Really learned from everybody. And I just start with Megan a little bit. Megan, it was interesting. I was hearing about medication-assisted treatment in the Department of Corrections, which I thought was interesting. And I don't know if you're the right person to ask this. Do we have any evaluation data on how that's working? The reason I ask is, when it was in Rhode Island, they did this. There was data that showed it prevented deaths, and it was helpful. But there was also data about how it reduced adverse impacts in incarcerated individuals running into conflict inside their settings. And I just I'm just curious if we had data about that at all.
So I don't have any data available to me yet. I know our research department is in the process of collecting and putting a lot of information together related to some of those topics. We also did recently, in the past month or so, survey all of our incarcerated that are participating in the MAP program. with just a series of a few questions as to whether they felt that the program was beneficial, did it contribute to a more positive impact on their lives, that type of thing. So our research department is collating all of those surveys right now. Unfortunately, because we're in corrections, we had to do it the old style way, you know, pencil and paper, and they fill it out, and we have to input all of that. So that is something that we are putting together, and I do anticipate that some of that information will be in DOC's annual report that will be going, you know, up forward to the bodies that may be in the fall. So.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I look forward to seeing what you come up with. I'm just curious, how do you fund this program, and do you know how much it costs per year?
So, I mean, we have a pretty large health services budget here. You know, the OTP contracts, we kind of have, we know what that cost is going, around what that cost is going to be. We have 13 contracts with different OTPs. The amount allocated to them, I can't recall off the top of my head, but I can tell you, like, as far as the medication goes, it's a variety of different sources. So we have our own DOCS pharmacies in some facilities, so we are able to stock and dispense our Suboxone through that. We have, you know, pretty good contracts for our facility pharmacies. Those that don't have a facility pharmacy on site, we utilize the New York State OGS contract. So we're utilizing right now a combination of OmniCare and CCRX for that. And then for Sublocade, we get that through SUNY Upstate. We have an MOU with them. So that is how we're getting that. And obviously that, you know, is a little bit more expensive. You know, $1,700 a shot is not cheap, but it works well. Like I said, it really does work well in our setting to help, number one, the nursing perspective, because obviously counting that many Suboxone films on every count when you have 200 people in a facility on it, it's very time consuming. So, you know, the sort of the cost of that one-time injection once a month sort of outweighs some of the costs that might be associated with increasing our nursing staff. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
And I would just add that there are opioid settlement funds that have gone to DOCS, actually in, I think, fiscal year 2022, to help, you know, with some of those costs as well. I see Leslie and then Charles.
Hi there. Thanks, everyone. Fantastic presentations. My question is with regard to accountability, right? So accountability requires the individual to primarily, I guess, serve some sort of a sentence with regard to being the, you know, the perpetuator or the provider of illicit and illegal substances and drugs. So what I'm interested in knowing, and in that frame, accountability really, not to minimize it, but all it does is require a person to sit behind bars, right? At its most basic level. So what I'm curious to know is what is being done to have the person really take accountability for their actions, like to admit that they did this, because and I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but in cases, the burden of proof is never on the defendant, is always on the plaintiff, and it's not, I guess, that difficult to meet the burden of proof if, you know, a person has been found with 10 laundry bags full of, you know, some illegal white substance. And so the sentence is, okay, you go to jail, you don't get a out of jail free card. So that's really my question in a rather convolutedly asked way. How do you get the person who you have now prosecuted to actually own up to what it is that they have done, and to do a 180.
I think, is that question towards Captain Brown or to Megan?
Well,
Or
it's
to Ellen, who, yeah.
toward Captain Brown. I'm sorry. I think he is on, but I think he's under a series of numbers, so I wasn't able to say what his name was.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, we can't make anybody do anything. Obviously, the police have to conduct their investigations, and when we make an arrest, we have probable cause to make an arrest, and we do so. Sometimes there's scenarios where people own up to it, and they're like, "Yeah, I have a problem. I can't get off this stuff. I want to get better," and they are accountable, and they do their time, and they get out of either jail or prison, and they get the help they need. And a lot of that is with support from family, friends, and that's I think that's great. I think that's how it's supposed to work. Other times that doesn't happen. Some people aren't accountable. Some people don't care. Some people don't cooperate with the police, and after the arrest, there might be very limited interaction, and what happens after that, that's really out of our hands. That person may be in the county jail or with state corrections, and what happens after that, that's we're out of the loop at that point. But we see both sides of it. Some really good stories, and then some. We see, unfortunately, some repeat offenders. So there's been a lot of repeat offenders where obviously it's not working. They're getting caught. They are not accountable, and it's like a vicious cycle. We see them over and over again. So there's a hole there. We're missing something in that area where that person isn't getting the help. If obviously we're seeing them over and over, so that's definitely an issue.
If I'd like to just say too, from the county jail aspect, our county jails all have counseling programs, and most of this is done on an individual basis with people. They go into counseling. Sometimes it's related to their charges. Other times it's related to things that may have impacted their charges. But in most county jails, this is something that is addressed, victim awareness, that type of thing, so that people can understand the impact of what their actions have had. But I agree with Captain Brown. This is something that is individual. It's not. It's not something we can predict, and from the county jail, from working in that environment, it may take somebody for admissions into county jail to actually understand where and what they've done and take some accountability for it. But I don't, at least in the county jail, and I don't want to speak for Megan, but I believe it's in docs too. We don't just put people behind bars. We look at, where they are, what we can do to provide them with a level of rehabilitation that they could take that opportunity and move forward with their life.
Great. Charles. You're on mute.
Thank you. My question is both for docs and SCOC around the assessments for their MAP programs. What assessment is being conducted for the services, and who is performing the assessment? In that, do they require a certification or a license, and has this been a limiting factor, especially in the more rural counties, and given the issuance of the 8 waivers because of the distance for services?
So I'll speak for the county jails. Can you hear me? Okay. So it varies in the county jails. So they come in, they're screened by an officer. Anybody with a history or is presenting to be under the influence gets an immediate referral to a medical professional, and that may be an RN. The RN would then do an assessment and contact a provider who is obviously licensed to provide a diagnosis of SUD. And in other facilities, it may be a CASAC who is performing that duty. Again, some jails are struggling with this. They may not have that level of counseling in their toolbox prior to this. They may be relying on a community agency to either an MOU or a contract for that person. Some of them are doing it via video conference. Other ones may have a CASAC on payroll, and they would be making that diagnosis. And the assessment tools that they use would be what their background is. So I know the CASACs have a toolkit with assessment tools to determine if someone has an SUD diagnosis. And physicians, oftentimes probably not as sophisticated tool. They take their history, and unfortunately, the people that are coming into the county jails are coming straight from the community. So some of them are addressing withdrawal and detoxing, before they can even talk to the person. But I can say that if they come in with being in some type of treatment, they are getting it continued pretty quickly in the county jails.
Well, I wonder if I could just follow up on that, and I didn't mean to jump in front of you all that quickly, Pedro, but I was just curious, like, do you know off the top of your head what percentage of the incarcerated individuals in New York have substance use disorder? And I think there's about 60,000 incarcerated individuals in New York. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but do we have that number? Like, do we know how big of an issue it is?
So I don't have a number. I can tell you that in the jails, what they're reporting is that about 20% of their admissions are qualifying for the program. I can give you a number of how many incarcerated individuals we have in county jails in a minute. I'd have to look it up on our database. So
I wasn't trying to play Stump the Star. I think that was the answer to my question. I mean, 20% sounds like a pretty significant number. So I was just, curious what that is here.
I agree. It's quite significant.
Pedro's got his hand raised here.
Well, actually, Megan, were you going to respond also to that question?
Yeah, so I can just briefly speak about the assessment process in docs. That is a one-on-one appointment with a docs clinician, whether it be, a medical doctor, a PA, or an NP. And there's a standardized assessment tool that we had created within docs, our CMO created, and that is what our providers use in that one-on-one assessment. Obviously, if methadone winds up being the medication that is indicated for that individual, they're then referred out to the OTP, and they complete their portion of however they want to, for their assessment process. And they all slightly vary by OTP. There's not 100% uniformity related to that.
Thank you both very much.
Pedro?
Yes, thank you very much. Fascinating presentations. So I have one follow-up question for Captain Brown. I'm actually very impressed by the large number of overdoses that the state troopers respond to. And based on the numbers, I haven't seen them, I just heard them. So it feels like it's 8 out of 10 are Narcan provided, and it's a non-fatal overdose, while maybe 2 out of 10 might be fatal. So I wonder if the state troopers are doing any kind of analysis to ascertain the differences between the fatal and non-fatal, and whether or not then we can improve dose rates of response, again, within that setting of very positive outlining in terms of the rate of non-fatal overdose that the state troopers are responding. And a bit of follow-up trends over time. Clearly, fentanyl has been penetrating the state of New York over the last years, and I wonder if the state troopers, since they were starting providing Narcan, they have seen an increase on number of responded overdose and then the rate to fatal and non-fatal. So, and then for dogs, Megan and Ellen, I'm very curious. I think this program bringing MAT to jails and prisons is fantastic. Long overdue, wonderful for the incarcerated population. So, do we have data whether or not the actual MAT in jails and prisons are preventing overdose, fatal and non-fatal within the jail system? And again, thank you, all the speakers. Fantastic.
Yeah, all right, Captain Brown here. So, yeah, you're right. We do have a very high level of the high number of overdoses that we respond to every year, and it's going up. You know, it was 1,100 in 2021, 1,200 in 2022, and we're going to probably surpass that this year. You know, like this year, for example, this year 775 suspected overdoses, 128 of those are fatal. Similar ratio last year and likewise in 2021. I don't have the assessment, and I don't know if we're doing that. I could probably look into that in terms of you know, success rates. I know like I said, we used naloxone 541 times this year. Last year we used it 819 times, and the year before that 751 times. So we're using it, obviously. How many times is it working? I mean, I don't have numbers in front of me, but I know if we get there quick enough, and you know, like I said before, we're first responders. We're one of the first ones on the scene, and if it's not us, it's oftentimes an EMS worker. It's working. It does work. You know, time is important though. You know, we have to get called quickly. We have to respond quickly. The trooper or the police officer or the EMS worker has to administer the Narcan quickly. The quicker, sooner that happens, the better success we have. So that's you know, that's really the important note. You know, unfortunately, sometimes there's an overdose at midnight and everybody falls asleep, and we don't find out about it till 8 in the next morning, and it's unfortunately too late. So, you know, we get cases like that too. So. But yeah, in terms of an assessment, I'm sure somebody in my agency is doing that. I don't have that information at my fingertips today, though.
I just would like to address the part of that question about overdoses in jails. So another function of the Commission of Correction is mortality investigations in state prisons and county jails, police lockups, and OCFS and SSDs. And I believe once we get into a year of this, we can probably start looking at overdose deaths and how it has impacted, how this program has impacted. I know that it's a very difficult kind of thing to measure. You know, have fights decreased since people are receiving MAT services? That's hard to predict. It's hard to measure that. But we are working with DCJS to see if we can come up with some ways to measure that. So yes, we are addressing that, and by word of mouth, what I'm getting from the facilities is that fewer people are going through withdrawal, and so that is a big impact. Obviously, suicides in county jails often happen when people are going through withdrawal through that first few days. So if they're not going through withdrawal, hopefully we will see a drop in that number.
And I'll just echo what Ellen just spoke about. I mean, obviously, the first year of this program, really our priority was making sure that the services were available to the incarcerated, and that obviously in our setting was a huge undertaking. You know, moving forward, I'm sure that that's that type of data and information is something we'll be more than willing and interested in collecting moving forward, so we can, make tweaks to the program as we may need to based on what that information is showing.
Yeah, so Captain Brown, this is Jim McDonald from the Department of Health. I just wanted to ask a question. You gave a really intense presentation, a lot of information there, and it sounds like the state police do a lot, and I think you really explained it really sort of not just a law enforcement role, but really a lot of the other things that are done outside traditional law enforcement. And I was just trying to understand if we had a pre-arrest diversion program that state police was involved in. And I was thinking back when I was in Rhode Island, I remember we had Bureau of Justice Assistance money, and there was a program where state police interacted with a social worker and they were just out every day doing pre-arrest diversion. I don't know if we're doing that specifically here, or if it's, or if not, or if it's something we've thought about. Any thoughts on that, Captain Brown?
Yeah, we're not. I'll be honest with you. That's definitely not something that that we are doing. The diversion programs, I think, might be that might be done maybe on the county level, or maybe with different agencies. But maybe that's something that we need to start looking at.
It was pre-arrest, and the idea was that state police knew the neighborhoods that were problematic, and if you brought a social worker with you, might be able to help people get into treatment and help people with some other resources when people weren't ready for treatment. And I saw Ellen raised her hand, so she might have had a follow-up on that.
I don't have a follow-up. I have a couple questions.
Oh, there you go.
For Captain Brown, kind of that dovetail onto what you just said. So one of my questions is bail reform. I know from county jail standpoint, we saw our populations go down as much as half related to bail reform. And so to me, as being a person who takes care of people in jails, I feel like we lost some of our opportunity to do an intervention with these people. So I guess from a arresting agency, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you feel that we are missing a population of people who would have been incarcerated before and are not now? So that's one of my questions, but I also have another question. And I know in our first meeting, we talked about, making the outrageous suggestions. So one of my thoughts, listening to you talking about your intelligence unit, going and pushing that information forward to local agencies. Is there any thought about pushing that out to maybe EMS and also to the public? I mean, obviously, if in Kingston there is a bad batch of something going out there, we do Amber Alerts for missing persons. Maybe putting that information out to the public too, so that we can be preventative. And I know if I bought product in Kingston that I need to get some test strips, kind of thing.
Yeah, so to answer your second question first, you're right. I don't disagree with you. We get a lot of great intel, from our intel unit, NICIC, as well as other agencies. Other local agencies have, Orange County. I'm from the southern part of the state. Orange County, Dutchess County, I know has units that distribute intelligence and communicate and make sure all the local agencies down there are aware of these things. But yeah, you're right. But a lot of the information we have is very sensitive. We call it law enforcement sensitive. Obviously, we don't want all of our information out to the public. I mean, that could jeopardize cases. That could, we don't want all that information in the hands of the wrong people. That being said, I agree with you. I think there could be an avenue of pushing this information out, and it could just be very generic. Like, hey, there's a bad batch in the city of Kingston. There was 5 overdoses last night. Kind of like an FYI. Be aware. Be aware. That I don't think that happens, and I agree with you. I think maybe if we could adjust our message. We don't have to tell the world everything that we're doing, but maybe if we do it generally, that could be an option. So I think that's a good idea. To answer your first question, bail reform. Huge. That has been a huge impact on what we do and what we've seen. And I'll give two examples. Arresting the person that's addicted, that has the dependency. It happens every single day, and it's so frustrating from a law enforcement perspective. We arrest the person for possessing opioids, right? We process them with fingerprints, photograph, try to gather some information, and because there's no bail, they go out the door. They go out the door, and what do? It's an unfortunate, it's a sad reality, but they go back to their house, back to their community, and because they are dependent and because they are addicted, they're literally buying drugs or using and abusing drugs hours later. Nothing, and then, we've had examples of arresting the same person multiple times in the same day. We've arrested the same person multiple times in the same week. It's so frustrating on our side because what are we doing? Nothing is getting resolved. Yes, we're making an arrest, and that person will have to answer to his or her charges down the road at a court appearance a month or two later. But in the meantime, nobody's helping that person, and that person is falling through the cracks. That is a huge problem that has to be addressed immediately. Back in the day before bail reform, a lot of times that person would end up going to jail, go to the county jail, and possibly get services there, possibly get help there. But that's not happening now. That person is unfortunately just thrown right back out into the real world, and good luck. So it's very frustrating. So I'd like to see a change there if possible. Second example would be the drug dealer, right? These are the worst people in the world, in my opinion. These people are pushing the drugs, they're bringing the drugs, the opioids into our communities, onto the streets. We do great investigations, we make great arrests. These are the people we're going after, right? These are the source of the supply. If we get the supply, we cut off the head of the snake, that's going to, it stops there. So when we make the arrest, a lot of times the charge isn't as high that would require bail. So that person, like the user, like the person that's dependent, is also released, and is, that person hours later is back to selling drugs, back to pushing illegal opioids back on the streets. Nothing's done. Nothing's changed other than a few hours they stopped because we were processing them, and that person is back out selling drugs. So those are just two examples, one on the drug dealer side and one on the person that is actually using. And in my opinion, that has to get corrected, and it's got to be done soon.
I'm going to jump in.
Go right ahead, Dr. Cunningham.
For a question about that, Captain Brown. So a couple of thoughts about partnering with programs. So, what we hear from some of the local police departments is that they partner with local programs. So they might work with peers, for example. And so I'm just wondering if that's something that's been explored, both for kind of the situations that you're talking about right now, of a way to sort of disrupt that cycle of having somebody in the treatment world, sort of be partnered with, and then also around overdoses. I'm very interested. So particularly for non-fatal overdoses, to me, it seems like there may be a role there to work with programs to then have a peer go out and follow up, as you're talking to family members and the other people on the scene, that seems like also a point of intervention where we could partner with our programs, to make sure that there is naloxone in the home or among the family members, to make sure that, that if somebody is interested in treatment, they can be linked at sort of at these critical points, that you're interacting with individuals.
Yeah, great ideas. And I think that does happen in some parts of the state. I know a few police agencies down in Ulster County, where I'm from, they do have units where after a non-fatal overdose, they will make notification to this unit, and which is composed of a police officer, social worker, regular people, and they come in and they attempt to intervene. but that's not statewide. That definitely can help. But just to piggyback off that, the state police, we don't just, I know we do a full proactive approach for fatal overdoses, but we also attempt to do that for non-fatal too. So the investigator does come in, or the trooper will come in, and if we see that we can do something, we could make a change. We could talk to this kid's parents or family or relative. We will do so. We will follow up on it. Usually it's with a phone call to one of our investigators, and we will do that same proactive approach, even if it's a non-fatal. Obviously, it's time consuming, but it's worth it, and it's necessary. So yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely an avenue we could take going forward. I don't know if that's like a standardized thing. Like I said, I think it is happening in different parts of the state, but I think it could and maybe should be happening throughout the entire state. Getting those services to people after the fact, especially for the non-fatal overdoses, and at least giving them some options. And sometimes it's not going to work. Some people don't want help, and that may never change. But there are people that are screaming for help and they need it. And sometimes it's just, hey, here's a phone number, or hey, I'm knocking on the door, and we'll sit down with you for 20 minutes. But yeah, that's definitely a great idea. And on your first point, with the intervention, I'm not familiar with that particular name that what you were talking about earlier. When we make an arrest, we're not really reaching out to anybody during that process. When after we make an arrest and that person gets released on their own recognizance, with bail, with the option of no bail, we're not really making any extra phone calls. So yeah, it would be nice to have points of contact, units available, like a nice little reference point, so we could at least make a phone call. Maybe we don't have to do it, but we could call somebody and they could do it, so that's another good idea as well.
Yeah, this is Dr. Jim McDonald. I want to just follow up on that. It was interesting because I think we might have identified something that might be, and I'm just picking what Dr. Cunningham was talking about, maybe a space where there might be a gap here, right? I was thinking about this notion of just linkage to care, which is something we talk a lot about, is that we're trying to do with just linkage to care. But it seems like, what I'm hearing from you, Captain Brown, in the past, someone might have been incarcerated for a time, maybe waiting for a bail hearing, whatever the reason. And, it's interesting. Right now, there might be space for that person to actually get started and induced on buprenorphine, which is something it's interesting. I talk about Rhode Island because I came there, but Rhode Island is small. They don't have jails. They have one place for the whole state. But there were times where people would be arrested on a Friday and inducted on a Saturday and released a few days later on their buprenorphine, when they got their bail. But at least that was a possibility. But it just seems like there might be a gap with linkage to care, and maybe developing infrastructure to do that, whether it's through existing programs or looking at new avenues, might be a space there. Because it seems to me like, one of the things I'm hearing in your voice is a little bit of just frustration about someone being arrested and then released right away. But I also heard a little more frustration about someone who's a dealer who's arrested and then released. And it sounds like you're saying that it might be a month or two before they interact with the judicial system. And it's a different animal a little bit when that happens. So there might be some space for us to think about that too, collectively. We're obviously not law enforcement individuals here, but it just, you prompted some thought in my mind, at least.
Yeah, no, it's frustrating. And yeah, I'm definitely, I understand the issues that people have dealing with opioids, and I understand that it's tough, but I really don't feel bad for the drug dealer that's arrested. That's who we're going after, in my opinion. I want to see that guy or girl arrested, behind bars, held accountable. Like those are the people, in my opinion, I want to go after, because they're pushing it. So yeah, if and that's a whole nother conversation. That's probably changing legislation, changing laws, which it's again, it's a whole nother conversation probably for another day. And I don't know if that's something that this task force could even do, but that's definitely a problem that we are seeing on the law enforcement side of things.
So I'm just looking at the time. I mean, I think this has been a really great discussion. And I'm just looking at the time in terms of the agenda. maybe if there's one sort of last question or comment that that's burning inside of somebody. Okay. Well, I do, so thank you all for your presentations, Megan, Ellen, and Captain Brown. I do think, as Dr. McDonald mentioned, I do think there's clearly areas here that we could do better in terms of working together to kind of disrupt some of these cycles. I think a lot of, I'm thinking about our treatment providers. They want to be in that space. They want, peers want to be there to be able to really intervene and, link people to services if people are interested, and certainly to provide additional, harm reduction services. And I'm sure that programs in the Department of Health similarly, would be very interested in that. And I also think that the issue too about the intelligence, that information going to programs that serve people who use drugs, I think would be really helpful. And, I think the other state agencies could help make sure, that all, people who are at the highest risk can be informed about that as well, so they can take steps to, if they're going to use more safely, or, testers, supplies, or whatever. So I do think that's another area that really we could probably work together a little bit better to make sure that those who are at highest risk are aware of bad batches that are out there. So I think just in terms of our next steps as a committee, so we have another virtual meeting. I think it's scheduled for next week, Friday the 22nd, and so it'll be in the same format. And I know, Tracy, you're in discussions with the agencies about the next sort of set of presentations.
Yes, we'll be doing reach out like we did prior to this meeting to another, what makes sense is like a cluster of member agencies to present. So we'll do that probably immediately following this meeting.
Great. And then I just want to remind everybody again to please let your stakeholders know again about the website, the email address, and the next in-person meeting where we will have time for the public comment in Staten Island. And that is on September 27th at 3:30. So just to encourage you all to make sure that your stakeholders are aware. Any other comments, Dr. McDonald?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cunningham. Yeah, this was great. And maybe we could just put the website in the chat so we all have it handy. Again, I think that'd be just lovely if we could. And thank you for organizing a great meeting. I think this worked really well. I love the theme of the meeting. I think it was great to, kind of focus on this topic. And I do think there were some ideas that are emerging here. I was hearing the word linkage to care, and thinking about alignment, and just thinking about other, touch points where you can, interact with people to just sort of persuade them to get into treatment. And sometimes persuade is a strong word, but I think that's really, very characteristic of this. And, and one of the thoughts I just want to close with is, really is a marathon. And I encourage people who are part of this to not be weary in their well-doing. I think particularly about, all the people doing all the work, that it's just a long haul, dealing with this epidemic for a long, long time. And it's interesting how progress is made, but it's not always measurable in a way that we'd like to see it. Because I think it just underscores how potent the products are, how much worse they're getting. It just really makes dealing with this particular public health issue so much more complex than many others. And it's part of why, really speaking to people at the department about looking at intervention points long before people are exposed to the substance. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed his meeting. Great discussion, by the way. Really love to see everybody involved. This is really fun. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.